Somewhere in Shenzhen right now, an engineer is charging a car battery from 10% to 80% in 3 minutes and 44 seconds. Read that again. Not 3 hours, not 30 minutes, under 4 minutes. And in that same lab, a different pack is being rated for a range of 1,500 kilometers on a single charge. If those two numbers are even half true at scale, everything you think you know about owning an electric vehicle in America is about to become outdated. This is not a story about a slightly better battery. This is a story about a Chinese company quietly building the leverage to decide what every car company on Earth gets to sell next. The company is CATL, and if you have never heard the name, that is by design, not by accident. CATL does not make cars. It makes the thing inside the cars, the battery pack. The part that determines whether your Tesla, your Ford, your Hyundai, or your BMW can go 300 miles or 500, whether it charges in 20 minutes or in 6. And as of 2026, CATL controls somewhere between 39 and 40% of the entire global electric vehicle battery market. Add its closest domestic rival, BYD, at around 16%, and two Chinese companies now supply more than half of every battery going into every electric car sold on the planet. That is not a business story anymore. That is an industrial fact with the weight of a geopolitical event. So let us talk about why American drivers should actually care, because the honest truth is that most people do not buy electric vehicles for the environment. They buy them, or they refuse to buy them, for two very specific and very unglamorous reasons. Range anxiety, the fear of being stranded 50 miles from the nearest charger, and charging time, the dread of standing in a parking lot for half an hour waiting for a car to drink electricity while your coffee goes cold. Every automaker on Earth has spent the last decade trying to solve those two problems with software tricks, bigger batteries, and marketing slogans. CATL just walked into the room and suggested solving them with chemistry instead. In April of 2026, at an event CATL called its Super Technology Day in Beijing, the company unveiled 6 new battery platforms at once. Not one breakthrough, 6, stacked on top of each other like a company trying to prove it has more ideas than anyone can keep up with. The two that matter most for this story are called Qilin and Shensing, and understanding the difference between them is understanding the entire strategy. Shensing is built for speed, a battery engineered around charging faster than anything currently on American roads. Qilin is built for distance, a battery engineered to cram more energy into less weight than anyone else has managed to do at real production scale. Together, they represent two different bets on what will finally make gasoline cars feel obsolete. Start with Qilin, because the number attached to it is the one that will end up in headlines. The third-generation Qilin battery, according to CATL, packs 280 watt-hours per kilogram into its cells, enough to build a pack of 125 kilowatt-hours weighing around 625 kilograms, roughly 255 kilograms lighter than an equivalent battery built with older lithium iron phosphate chemistry. CATL claims that pack alone is enough to push a large sedan past 1,000 kilometers of range. But the real headline grabber sits one level above that, in a variant CATL calls the Qilin Condensed Battery, a semi-solid design using what the company describes as condensed matter electrolyte. Its claimed energy density climbs to 350 watt-hours per kilogram, a figure CATL is calling a record for a battery built at production scale rather than in a laboratory prototype. The range attached to that battery, again according to CATL, is 1,500 kilometers for an executive sedan and around 1,000 kilometers for a full-size electric SUV. Now here comes the part every honest documentary has to include, and every marketing department desperately hopes you skip. Those numbers are measured using a Chinese testing standard called CLTC, and CLTC is famously generous. It assumes lower average speeds, gentler acceleration, and driving conditions that look nothing like an American highway at 75 miles an hour with the air conditioning running. When you translate CLTC numbers into the American EPA standard, the number that actually appears on a window sticker at a dealership in Ohio or Texas, the real-world figure typically drops by 25 to 40%. That means a car claiming 1,500 kilometers in China might realistically deliver something closer to 700 to 900 kilometers under EPA testing, which translates to roughly 430 to 560 miles. Still an enormous number. Still enough to make most current American electric vehicles look modest by comparison. just not the literal 1,500 kilometers plastered across the press release. Now let us talk about Shenxing, because if Qilin is the battery that wins the range argument, Shenxing is the battery that could completely change the psychology of owning an electric car. CATL claims that Shenxing's third-generation platform can take a battery from 10% charge to 35% charge in about 1 minute, from 10% to 80% in 3 minutes and 44 seconds, and from 10% all the way to 98% in 6 minutes and 27 seconds. Even more striking, CATL says the battery can perform a fast charge from 20% to 98% in around 9 minutes at negative 30 degrees Celsius, a temperature that turns most current electric vehicles into sluggish, range-starved machines. To put that in perspective, 6 minutes and 27 seconds is close to the time it takes to fill a gasoline tank and pay at the pump. If that number holds up outside a controlled demonstration, the single biggest cultural objection to owning an electric vehicle, the fear of standing around waiting, quietly disappears. But here's where the story earns its tension, because a battery capable of absorbing that much energy that quickly is only half of the equation. The other half is everything standing between the battery and the wall outlet. Charging at the rates CATL is describing, somewhere around 10 times the battery's capacity per hour continuously, with peaks reported around 15 times, implies power levels in the range of 600 to over 1,000 kilowatts flowing into a single vehicle. Right now, in 2026, most public fast chargers across the United States top out somewhere between 350 and 400 kilowatts, and that is only at the newest stations. The battery, in other words, may already be faster than the country it would need to plug into. This is the quiet warning buried inside an otherwise thrilling announcement. A battery can only charge as fast as the weakest link in the chain connecting it to the grid, and right now in most of America, that weakest link is not the battery at all. This is worth sitting with for a moment because it flips the entire conversation people have been having about electric vehicles for the past decade. For years, the assumption was that battery chemistry was the bottleneck, that engineers simply had not figured out how to store enough energy or move it fast enough. CATL's announcement suggests the opposite may soon be true. The chemistry might outrun the infrastructure. Chargers, transformers, substations, and grid capacity could become the new limiting factor, not the pack sitting under the car. And infrastructure, unlike a battery cell, cannot be redesigned in a laboratory. It has to be dug up, rewired, and rebuilt across an entire continent, one parking lot at a time. Now let us widen the lens, because this is not really a story about one company's laboratory achievement. This is a story about who controls the future of the automobile industry. For most of the 20th century, the automaker was king. Ford, General Motors, Toyota, and eventually Tesla decided what a car could do, and suppliers simply built parts to specification. But electric vehicles have quietly rewritten that hierarchy. The battery is not just a component anymore. It is the single most expensive, most technically demanding part of the entire vehicle, often accounting for a third or more of the total cost. Whoever controls the battery increasingly controls the pace at which the entire industry is allowed to move. And right now, that company is not Ford, not General Motors, not even Tesla. It is CATL, a company most American consumers could not identify if you showed them the logo. Consider what that means for Tesla specifically, because Tesla has spent years telling investors and the public that its in-house battery technology, the so-called 4680 cell, was going to be its unshakable advantage. Independent measurements from cells produced at Tesla's Texas Gigafactory suggest an energy density somewhere around 244 to 260 watt-hours per kilogram. CATL's Qilin cell, again by the company's own account, is already sitting at 280. The condensed variant is claiming 350. If those figures hold, Tesla is not leading the battery race anymore. It is trailing the very supplier it has spent years trying to avoid depending on. That does not mean Tesla is finished. It means Tesla now faces a genuinely uncomfortable decision. Keep pouring resources into an in-house cell program that is currently behind, or quietly lean harder on the Chinese suppliers it once tried to distance itself from. And CATL is not even winning this race alone. BYD, the other giant of Chinese battery manufacturing, is running its own version of this exact story. BYD's Blade 2.0 battery, built around an improved lithium iron phosphate chemistry, is claiming somewhere between 1,000 and 1,036 kilometers of CLTC range in its flagship vehicles, alongside a fast charge capability that takes a pack from 10% to 70% in about 5 minutes, and 10% to 97% in around 9 minutes. This is the part American viewers rarely get told. CATL is not a lone genius pulling ahead of a sleepy industry. CATL and BYD are locked in an arms race against each other inside their own country, and the byproduct of that internal competition is a pace of innovation that Western automakers are struggling to match from the outside. So here is the provocative question worth sitting with before we move toward the ending. If two Chinese companies are setting the technological ceiling for what an electric vehicle can do, and American and European automakers are increasingly buying their batteries from those same two companies, does it even matter anymore which logo is on the hood of the car? Is the real competition happening between Ford and Tesla and Volkswagen? Or is it happening one level below the paint job, between CATL and BYD, with automakers simply assembling whatever chemistry they are allowed to purchase? Before anyone gets too excited about a future filled with 6-minute charges and 500-mile range, we need to talk about the part every press release conveniently buries near the bottom: cost. Higher energy density does not automatically mean a cheaper car. Nickel-based chemistries and semi-solid condensed matter designs are considerably more expensive to manufacture than the iron phosphate batteries currently powering most affordable electric vehicles. According to industry cost analysis, lithium iron phosphate packs were already running around 40% cheaper per kilowatt hour than nickel-based packs back in 2025. That gap does not close just because a new demonstration battery hit an impressive number in a lab, which means the very first vehicles to carry Qilin condensed batteries will almost certainly be premium sedans and luxury SUVs, the kind of cars most American families are not cross-shopping. If you are hoping this technology drops the price of your next electric vehicle, the honest answer is not yet, and probably not for several years. There is also the matter of production scale, a detail that separates a headline from a showroom. CATL describes its most advanced condensed matter cells as reaching what it calls gigawatt-hour level industrialization, which sounds massive until you compare it to CATL's total annual output, measured in the hundreds of gigawatt hours. In plain terms, the most extreme version of this technology is being built in relatively small batches right now, closer to an early production run than a global rollout. Meanwhile, CATL's sodium-ion battery, called Naxtra, aimed at cheaper, cold weather-friendly applications, is targeting large-scale mass production by the fourth quarter of 2026. That is the technology more likely to eventually touch affordable vehicles, not the flagship condensed matter cell getting all the attention. So, when will an American driver actually feel any of this in their own garage? Realistically, the honest timeline looks something like this. Premium Chinese vehicles and select international export markets get access first, likely within the next year or two. Joint ventures, licensing deals, and gradual adoption by global automakers follow after that. The same pattern the industry has followed with nearly every major battery advancement over the past decade. What an American consumer should actually watch for is not a single dramatic announcement, but a slow accumulation of smaller signals, fast charge times dropping under 10 minutes becoming common instead of exceptional, EPA-rated ranges pushing past 350 miles as a baseline rather than a luxury feature, battery packs getting lighter and cheaper at the same time, and meaningful improvement in cold weather charging performance, something that has quietly frustrated electric vehicle owners across the northern half of this country for years. Which brings us back to the title everyone clicked on. Is CATL's battery about to make today's electric vehicles obsolete? No, not literally, and not tomorrow. The car sitting in your driveway right now is not going to stop working because a laboratory in Beijing hit an impressive number on a datasheet. But something else might be quietly becoming obsolete, something harder to see, and arguably more important: the old definition of what an electric vehicle is supposed to be. For the last 10 years, 300 miles of range and 30 minutes of charging time have been treated as the finish line, the moment when electric vehicles finally became good enough. CATL just moved that finish line without asking anyone's permission. The next great competition in the automotive world may not be fought between car brands at all. It may be fought one layer beneath the surface, between the companies that build the batteries themselves, with automakers reduced to assembling whatever chemistry they can secure a contract for. Tesla, Ford, General Motors, Volkswagen, and every other name you associate with cars are, in a very real sense, now customers of an industry they do not control. And that is the uncomfortable, fascinating truth sitting underneath this entire story. The next revolution in transportation might not come from a car company reinventing the car. It might come from a battery company quietly redefining what a car is even capable of doing. If you have ever sat in a parking lot watching a charging percentage crawl upward and wondered whether there was a better way, this is exactly the kind of shift that decides what shows up in your driveway 5 years from now. To not get caught off guard by what is coming next in this industry, join us here at Driven to Distraction.